the tank. It's supposed to be, the tank's only supposed to be so much above the injection pump. So I figured we'll just put a tank on it and a filter, and I just put the inside in that, just so it's got something in it. I said, I wonder what they had in it for an engine. And after I went in the smoke behinds, because we went in there to buy something for the house while I was over there, and I seen the book for sale on the counter. But I still didn't know. I never thought to even ask him who owned the boat, you know. But so the boat disappeared one day. We took the kids over to play in the park and drove by to see the boat, and it's gone. Oh, and then I panicked. I thought they junked it. And I was upset. So nothing you can do. It's gone. And my son, he's the senior IT tech at the Alpena General Hospital. You know, does all their computer work. And his office is in the back, and when they're making changes, they change all the computers out. They got a grant to make all this change on the computers, and they got these great big racks with all the computers, you know, the motherboards are all sitting in.
Sure.
So he called me one day and he said, Dad, he said, do you want those cabinets? I said, yeah, I'll take them. You know, they said, well, come down and get them. All you got to do is haul them away. So I was going the back way and load the cabins up, and I was driving out, and I was looking across to the museum, and I seen the boat sitting there. And I said, well, there's where it went. You know, so at least it didn't get junked. So when I got home, I kind of forgot about it for 2 or 3 more years, and since my work got really slow in the wintertime, I called the museum, and I talked to Chris, and I was talking with her, and she said, well, what's your interest? And I said, my interest is not in the boat, it's what drives the boat. And she said, well, what's your interest for the motor? And I said, well, I just wonder what they're doing, what's going to happen to it. Well, they want to get it running for running display and on and on. And I said, okay. I said, I was wondering, since I'm slow, I said maybe I could offer my services to help the guy that's working on it to get it running. And she got really excited, you know, and she said, oh my gosh, she said, you got to talk to Richard Lutz, you know. He's the one that's the head of this project. So she said, he's gone for 2 weeks, so I'll have him call you. So a couple of weeks he called, and he wanted to know what my interest was, and I said, well, I'm interested in offering my services to help work on the engine, get it running. He got real excited. So then he said, I got to come out and meet you. So the next day at 9 o'clock, he come out, and we sit up in the back shed there visiting, and so he wanted to know what my interest. I said, well, I collect and restore antique diesel engines, and I'm a gas and diesel mechanic, machinist, and welder, and right on down through. And he said, oh, that would be just great. You know, you want to help on that motor. But he said, we don't have no room, no place to work on it. And I said, well, if I clean out this part of my garage, because they had this part full up to the tool lot, I said, we could bring it out here. So then he really got excited. So a month or 2 later, we finally got it out here. And he said, well, you got to go in and talk to Chris. So a few weeks later, I had time, I went in and talked to Chris. And she introduced me to another guy, and we went in the conference room and just talking. And she said, well, you know, what are your hobbies and interests? And I told her, I said, I've been a mechanic. As soon as I could walk, that's when it took off. Anything that was in my path, you know, I'd destroy it. Just
take it apart.
Take it apart. And I said, I've been a mechanic all my life. That's all I want. We've been farmers. But my brother and I, we jumped cars and was on the farm and built doodle bugs and stuff. And anyways, we drug her up the hill because it was sitting beside the boat. And Dallas was going to truck it out for me, but the time we got it drugged up the hill and got it all hooked up, trying to lift it and stuff, it was getting dark. And his trailer was about 3 feet, 2 trees, and now painted a big spec block truck with a big
crane
with a boom on it.
Yeah.
But the boom can't lift it by itself. They have to set the boom up. It's got two big cylinders on the boom, and they lift the boom up so high, and then they got the cable winch on it that can go, you know, in or out.
Okay.
And they make it as short as Pop. What, buddy?
Jeez, wow.
Papa's over here. And then they pick it up with the cable winch. But the boom itself won't pick her up. They can hold it, but they can't pick with it.
Wow.
When he picked it off, he had it sitting in the doorway, and Dallas brought over a big forklift, and he shoved it in with a forklift on his rollers. But there's 11,000 pounds sitting there. The biggest thing when we get done with is getting it back out.
Well, what am I looking at here?
Okay, Denver, these are the injection pumps.
Okay.
This is injection pump drive system. All this mechanism.
So that's all a mechanical pumping system that...
Yeah, this is the whole heart of the engine. All of this through here is control for the governor and advanced retardant control.
Okay.
This is the governor weights up in here, and this is the air starting valve up here.
Okay. Because, yeah, they said they fired it up with air.
Yeah.
So they must have had an onboard
air
tank.
Tank.
It always had to be loaded with air, otherwise you ain't going nowhere, right? Kind
Nope.
of thing. Yeah.
Or else you got to pump it up.
So did it have an onboard compressor then too? Or is it something
There's
they
one
got
on the
off
engine,
Okay, there's one on the
and then there's one in the boat, and it drives off from an old Delco generator plant, DC generator plant.
Okay.
It's hooked to the air compressor, so they got lights and running the little air compressor. So after this is running, then it has its own makeup air compressor on it. Plus there's a great big one outside that plugs in the front of here that run the whole boat. Because everything on the boat's all air
All
operated.
air, yeah, the winch or the whatever they're
Yep.
calling, and that's up.
Castman drives are all got air motors on them.
Oh, no kidding.
But all this mechanism here, all this is froze up.
Look at all that.
None of this moved. And this is the governor here. This controls up in here, you know, for speeding up, slowing down. Then this is the stationary one you can kind of set.
Oh,
Governor.
set the speed.
And this one here, if you look over there, if you look inside here, see this big piece in here?
Okay.
See it turn?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that controls, advances, and retards the injection pump.
Okay.
But all that was all froze up. I mean,
kidding.
froze solid. Well, it had water in it, cleaned up to here.
Water?
Water. Well, it was gone when I tore it apart, and I couldn't take this off. This bolt's under here when I had all this off, because the governor weights are out, and so they're up in this part of the housing. They wouldn't pass through here. I couldn't get them out because they were froze out that way. So I got everything all here, all this all stripped off, and this unbolts underneath here.
So all the controls for the boat are done
Right
there. So it's one of those set it and forget it kind of things, eh?
Yeah.
Or till the guy. I mean, does the pilot know to talk to the engine guy? Says, "Give me gas" or whatever. You know.
Must
I'm
be.
guessing, yeah, because I mean, if there's no, because this is below deck from what I understand.
Well, there's let's see.
I mean, does it have a remote control? I guess up at the wheelhouse or something. I wonder.
I think it had another lever hooked on here, so the throttle was up in the wheelhouse.
Okay.
Because the lever for the transmission was in the wheelhouse.
Now, is that the transmission up there in the front there?
That's the transmission.
Okay. I was wondering, it's got to have a transmission somewhere, but... Another chunk of iron, eh?
Well, I stripped all the mechanism out of here because it's a big snap-over center clutch.
Oh, yeah.
Then this great big band here went around that drum, but all this old oil, you can see the big gob still stuck on here,
Sure.
like that.
Sure.
And it drug so hard you couldn't roll the engine over, even when it was released.
Because all that built up oil and grime.
So my idea was, I told Richard, it splits right here. So I was going to unbolt it, because I had all of this all off. See right
Oh,
here?
the frame?
And the big bolt here. So I was going to unbolt it from the crank, slide it back so the crank misses this here, and make shield underneath there and bolt it back together. So it'll be on there,
Sure.
but not turning any of this. Well, when I got this off and this all stripped out, There's bolts in this side that go this way too. Both ways.
Oh, wow.
And you can't get them out without taking that out. So I take all these bolts out around this big drum, unbolt her back here, take chain fall, and pull that whole assembly out. And I gutted the inside out of here. I'll show you all the parts that went in there. And I thought, well, I'll put it all back together. There's a big bearing on the end of that shaft about this big. It's that wide, and it's a double roller, and it's in rough shape.
Yeah.
But it's all
You'll
together.
never find those again.
It's a self-aligning one. You know, you can hold the bearing here, and the center part will turn.
We'll wobble it.
And I figured that bearing would be about $500. So I thought, all I got to do is hold this end of the shaft in there. So I just fucking packed it with grease after I gutted it, shoved it all back in there, bolted it all back together. And the only other problem I have when I'm rolling the engine over, this is free turning. You know, it's not connected to the crankshaft.
So it doesn't have, is it like those plates for a clutch, a fibrous plate kind of thing?
Without them, I have no drive.
Right.
And I wanted to use it as another flywheel on this end, you know, to carry the RPM, you know, carry the engine over.
Sure.
So I had to go up in here. I drilled this big hub, and I put a 1/2-inch Allen screw in and locked it to the shaft there. Then I had to go back here and do the same here to lock this shaft to it. So I locked this to the crankshaft, then I locked that shaft to this.
So you got like a PTO at the end.
So it'll run with the engine.
You'll be able to see, yeah.
So that way it'll all
But
drag together.
that big band, that was part of the tranny as far as
that went around there.
Casing all the plate or the pads or what the hell they call them. Yeah, okay.
Well, when it's done, it's neutral.
Right.
When you pull the lever,
so probably just neutral forward, period, eh? Or no, was there reverse?
Reverse, neutral, and then forward.
Okay, there's both. Okay.
So they could run it in neutral to start it. When they pull the lever, I think when they pull the lever one way, this band would lock. That would give you one drive, I think, like for reverse. Then you release it, you pull the lever the other way. The snap over center clutch locks in. You know, locks the clutch back inside. Then that would be your forward drive.
Obviously.
I didn't plan on what we got into. I thought we just cleaned the fuel system.
Clean up and boom,
But didn't realize all this was bad, and the air starting valves.
Well, it's it's a real good thing that you got a manual for it, or you got some book on this on how to go about it and whatever.
They just
I'd be shooting blind on something like this.
They just take and I called them and asked them about manuals, and they said all we got them on is the computer. If you got a copy machine, your computer, we'll download it in your computer. Then you just download it on your copy machine.
Whole shop manual kind of.
But it's no bigger than a little Bible. Hard to read, so I give it to my son or my wife, and she's working at the bank, and she blowed it up as big as she can blow them all up. And then I needed more stuff bigger, like all this system here. Well, great flashlight. It's hard to see the insides of it.
So it's probably just neutral forward, period, eh? Or no, was there reverse?
Reverse, neutral, and then forward.
Okay, there's both. Okay.
So they could run it in neutral to start it. When they pull the lever, I think when they pull the lever one way, this band would lock. That would give you one drive, I think, like for reverse. Then you release it, you pull the lever the other way. The snap over center clutch locks in, locks the clutch back inside. Then that would be your forward drive.
Oh.
Then that's the water pump for the bilge inside the boat, because the boat always leaks water.
Sure.
So that keeps the
boat. It draws in the water and just circulates. This is a pump in there somehow, eh?
Pistons in here, valves in here.
Okay.
Water circulates through here.
And they made it all out of brass rather than obviously just for the rust deal.
And this pump.
Was this the water jacket for?
That's one that feeds it.
Okay.
Then they have adjustments on here, so you can have each cylinder. See how the line's bigger, then it gets smaller.
Oh.
So you can adjust it. Have each cylinder run about the same temperature.
Same temp. Yeah.
And then the water.
They do that just so it gets the water to the back end here, right?
Yeah, like this one would be shut off more. This one would be open more, and that one would probably be wide open.
Gotcha.
Because that's only a piston pump, so it just keeps giving it a shot. And the piston in that one, because there's a packing gland that goes in here, Well, that piston was wore right out. That was on this side. In fact, it was wore down that much.
That like rubber or some fiber kind of leathery kind of thing on the...
Yeah, well, they got, I got like hydraulic cylinder packings in here.
Okay.
Where before they had like a big old rope, you just keep packing a rope in there.
Sure, graphited rope.
But it wore that brass cylinder out horrible. Yeah. But the book says, if you're in a bind out in the lake and if this pump quits, you can rob that one on this side. But the valving's different inside here though. There are different valves in here. And so I took that piston and stuck it on this side. But this mechanism here is all wore out. You know, they're wore on a taper.
Okay.
So I trying to fit them back in there. I'd be free. I turn the engine so far, well then they bind because they're egg shaped. You know, instead of being perfectly round. And somebody already ground the snot out of these, so I had to take and refit them, and just so they can turn without binding. And then I changed the oiling system on the way they had it set up the oil. I got it set up like for right here. I'm going to put grease fitting, big grease fittings on, big grease cups. And then I took inside the system when they had to depart the way it oiled. I got it set up so actually all three of these are supposed to oil from this system here.
That was that sight glass up at the top, oil filler?
Yep, this is the oil bank here. This oil's a piston. Then they got another, I haven't got it out here, another one comes down here and line hangs in here, so it's going up and down, it collects the oil, fills that one up with oil. Then the three cams down there are drilled, so one feeds this one and the next one feeds that one, but it's not getting enough, you know, it's not getting enough oil. So I thought I'll just seal them all off and I'll just make them so they all grease with a big grease cup.
So on the crank there, on the actual engine, was it just like wet sump kind of oiling?
Okay.
Or what was going on there?
Right here. Okay, see the little tiny hole in the crank there?
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, here's the oil line that goes in for the rod right here.
Okay. Oh wow, look at the size of that crank.
Then see there's a brass ring right in there on the crankshaft. Well, that oil line that brass ring is set like this. The oil line sets in it here. So when it's going around, it just centrifugal feeds the oil to the outside of that ring. And then it feeds it through that hole there, because that's drilled into that ring.
Okay. And that's true on every cylinder then?
All three of them.
Okay.
These oil the main bearings.
And then it returns it somehow, or what?
No, the waste oil just kind of what throws off. Accumulates in the crank.
Okay.
This line, this line and this line, the upper one, these two oil the pistons, and then there's a groove all around inside that cylinder that the oil fills that groove up. Then this bottom one here, this oil is the wrist pin.
Oh wow.
As it's running. And then the extra build up in there.
So the wrist pin is just a spray unit then, kind of, or?
No, it's a drip system.
Okay.
Or, I should say, pressure system. Okay, if you look in that side of the crankcase, there's a little metal tube. See it right over there in that corner? That's right at the bottom of the crankcase. It goes up and goes out over there. So as it's running any accumulation of fluid down there, it just blows it out. It's like a Detroit diesel. They always have them weeping lines.
Okay.
Then that just kind of blows it out. But this crank journal is they let her run too long without keeping the bearing adjusted on here, and that's wore 7/1000. It's high, it's 4 inch here.
You got that blue on there, and it just...
Yeah, and it comes down here, it's 7/1000 smaller.
Okay.
So I got to take the rod bearing and taper it 7/1000. Because I want the clearance. You're supposed to run it at about 10/1000 clearance, and it had a knock in it.
Better to have more than less.
Well, Babbitt bearings, you run them more clearance than you do with the new engines.
Right.
And of course, the engine had rust in the cylinder, so it only turned so far and stopped. And once I got them, I haven't honed them yet. But once I
Clean them up a little.
soaked them up with penetrating oil and got them to roll over, I could hear a clunk every now and then. And so of course I'm trying to do this, roll the engine, and hear the clunk. And I had this set here, and the book says set it about there. Then you take this bar and you stick it under the rod cap and you push it up and down.
See where you...
To see how much it moves. It's supposed to move about 10 thousandths. Well, I was moving over 1/8 of an inch. Well, clunk, 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 you know.
He was sloppy.
Too sloppy. So when I pulled it apart, they had a ton of shims on all the rods, and they were metal banding shims. And I thought, why in the world did they shim them up like that? The other two cranks are pretty good shape outside they got rust stains on them. And I got the book that Vogelheim was selling at the lumber company there when they was in business.
Oh, yeah?
That book, and they were selling that book for like $5 or $6. And they was going to take that money to restore the engine, you know, the boat and stuff. So then I bought the book from them, but I didn't know that they owned the boat. I never.
Oh, Vogelheim did it one point?
They own the boat. I didn't know that. The Vogelheim family owned the boat.
Okay.
So I bought the book just to get an idea what engine it had in it, and it was wonderful reading. Well, anyways, in the back of the book, there's a whole list of people that run this boat. And I thought,
oh, the captains and the crew and
yeah,
whatnot.
I wonder how many of these are still alive. So they're from Rogers City. So I made a phone call to the first one I called. I forgot his name. And I told him who I was, and I said, are you so-and-so? Yeah. I said, well, I'm working on the Catherine V. And I got your name out of that book. And he said, oh my gosh. He said, I wondered what I was going to do with it. And I said, well, we're trying to get it, plan on getting it running for a running display. And so I said, can you tell me? He said, I'm the last one that run the engine. And I said, well, when was the last time it run? He said, 1975. And I said, well, how did it run? He said, oh, it started good, run good, but he said, it's got a bad wrist pin in it. It's got a horrible knock in it. And I said, well, it's not the wrist pin, it's the rod bearing. Mm-hmm. And I said, and it's full of shims. Somebody's made a whole stack of shims. And he said, oh, they had a guy in the quarry in Rogers City pour the rod bearings, you know, and for the engine. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, that would explain why all the shims in there. But somebody didn't pay attention. You're supposed to run up so long, pull the covers off, go in and feel the bearings and feel how warm, hot they are, and keep track of them and then check the clearance. Well, apparently nobody ever checked it. They just put it back together and just run it. So this in here, you know, pounded out the crank.
All right.
So I got the idea for fixing that, and then I got to hone the cylinders and clean them. We got to clean, this is the air passage where the air comes up. If you look right through there, you can see right out through to the exhaust side.
Oh, yeah.
So we got to clean, all this has got to be scrubbed out. The crankcase has got to be scrubbed out. But that's like sticking your hands in ink. I had my arms wrapped.
Oh, it's been there so many years, all that
metallic
stuff and everything.
Working in there, every time my hand come out, carburetor cream will hardly take it off. Well,
Gojo, it laughs at Gojo probably, eh?
Richard Lutz, you know, he's been wanting to help me on this, and Bill White.
Now, who's Richard Lutz? He's affiliated with
He's the professor.
Okay.
And this is kind of his pet project.
Okay.
And then Bill White, wife, I guess, umpteen years ago, she offered her husband service because he works on the trains and stuff. He used to work on trains. And she offered his services to get the motor running. And I met Bill over to Terry Tebow's one time. And I asked him, and I heard him talking about the engine. And he told me the story. He said, yeah, I said, my wife volunteered me to work on this motor. Well, The most he got done was building the skids for it. You know, got them mounted on the skids.
Those are the pistons.
Yeah, them babies are heavy.
Yeah, how much, 300 pounds a piece?
I'm guessing.
Right around there, it's all good steel.
When I had one just sitting on a tape by itself, you kind of can lift one end up, but there's no way you're going to lift it up.
And if you do, you're a better man than I. If somebody tries to steal him, you let him if he's going to carry it out.
Yeah, they can carry it off. Yeah, I have at it. Okay, this is a wrist pin.
Two cycle, really?
Yep. See the hole right there?
Okay.
There's oilers in the side of the cylinder there. Here's the pictures when I tore it apart. Now this is there's so much water it had in it. This is the bottom part where all this was froze up. This is what it looked like when I got the cover off. I was so discouraged when I seen how much, you know, I see the big bubbles of rust.
Oh, it's where it's submerged in water?
Oh, I thought, we're done. You know,
the metal's going to be degraded.
It's just bad shape. And all these nuts here got cotter keys in them. The bolts go through, got cotter keys. I was so discouraged that I just quit. I just went in the house and, you know, and quit. And I called Bill White, and he's in Florida, and I said, we got to try and find another engine for parts. And he said he'd look down there, and I told Richard, and Richard said he knows where there's an engine sitting, the other side of the state someplace. And we got to press him down and go see it. And so the next day I come back down, looked at it again, and I took the blowgun, because a lot of it was powdered rust too, so I blowed all the rust out of there, and of course it still looked bad. And then I seen all these little cotter keys in there, and I said, I know they won't come out, they're rotted in. I got every one of them out without breaking them. Well then, taking these are like a castle nut, that's an enclosed top on it.
Okay.
So I thought, well, I wonder how tight them are. I didn't want to twist anything off here. Well, I just took my time, put a wrench on it, just pull real slow, and they come off.
No heat, anything, just...
Nope, they come off. I had a hard time getting these off the shaft, because this wheel turns, and then it's got a bushing, a metal bushing inside of it. So when this nut's tightened down, it tightens down that metal bushing, and this pip turns on the bushing. Well, the bushing I couldn't get out of the wheel. You couldn't take them out, save your soul. I had to put them in a press them out. Well, then I got a Sun home machine, wristband machine down there, and so I cleaned everything up, wire brushed everything up, sanded everything down, and I took this wheel down on that hone, and I just used a fine stone, and I just polished the inside, not even a tenth of a thousandth, just so that little roller would fit back into it again by hand.
Sure.
So I got them cleaned up and fitted, and they got little tiny oil holes all around that gear. And of course I had to drill all them out. Okay, here's the top of the governor once I got it off. Once I got it off there, I was able to get these to move enough to get that top cover off. And here's pulling the pistons out. There's starting, there's farther up, there's farther up. In my chain fall, the rod just cleared the housing.
Oh,
it's
tall enough, eh? Wow.
And there's one with the piston out. And these are the rod bearings. And this shaft right here, that's it. I got it behind that motor. I got that from Terry Tebow. That's a 4-inch cylinder shaft out of a great big dump truck. You know, it's got that big single cylinder.
Oh, for the dump? Yeah, okay.
This is a telescoping. This goes inside of another cylinder.
Okay.
And I wanted something that matched the crankshaft, and I hunted and looked, and every time I find a 4-inch shaft, it's either 7 thousandths too big, so many thousandths too small, and I said, I thought 4-inch would be 4-inch. He said, nah. He said, take this shaft. He says, exactly 4-inch. Wow. And that's what the crank is. So I stick that in my vise, well, then I fit the bearings to it. So that when I get ready to put it back in the engine, I ain't got to be, because these weigh 40 pounds.
You don't have to pull the crank or, yeah.
No,
yeah.
That way I can put the caps in, you know, shove the pistons in and put my shims in, I'm ready to go. Then this here, these are motor shafts out of electric motors, and I get them from Ruins Electric and Howell because they make electric motors, and they repair them. And sometimes you get a bad shaft or something, you know, they'll just put a brand new shaft in it. So my father-in-law, he gives me a bunch of these because they already got live centers in them. I hate putting a live center in the shaft.
You gotta be dead centers, yeah.
You gotta be dead
Sure.
center.
Yeah.
These are dead center, so I just chuck them in the lathe and
Sure.
good to go. So I'm making a valve for the air compressor. Yeah, there's the valve. So here's machining it down, and got it down here. I'm just checking my length and stuff. Some more machining. There's side by side, and here, they're kind of out of order. But I forgot to take pictures of the stuff, what they wanted. So I got my wife come down and started taking a bunch of pictures. And here's rebuilding one of the drip oilers for the air starter. And there's getting closer on my dimensions on the valve. And there's the head goes in, and there's fitting it. Okay, these here are the air starting valves for the engine. They screw into the engine block just below the head. And the valves in them, well, they're this small. And the little seat here is built into the valve, or into that little housing. They were so rotten, I couldn't use a small valve. I had to take and
Oversize it.
I had to oversize it. Okay, here's the little valve that came out. Of course, there's nothing left of the little seat. And these have a 53 Detroit diesel.
No kidding.
And they're the same
You just
length,
machined it
same
down?
diameter, so I just machined the heads down to fit my new seat. But you can't thread these valve stems. They're just too hard.
Yeah.
So what I've done, and I always collect electronic stuff, so I had a bunch of, these are off control on radio knobs, you know, the round knobs.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they already have little set screws in them, so I just taken grind notches in the valve guide, or the valve stem, and Loctite them little screws into it, so that gives me my retainer.
Retaining it, yeah.
So when the air comes in here by that timer up there, it just pushes open, shoves the piston down, closes. When the engine's running, then you back these off. You're supposed to. And that holds
Locks it in.
shut.
Yeah.
Keep it shut.
Wow.
So
So there's kind of a procedure to start this motor. And
oh yeah,
everything.
there's quite a
Not just simply turning the key and get on your way.
There's quite a bit to it. And like I said, they're 40 pounds. I think one end weighs 17 or 18 pounds, the other end 19, something like that, each half.
Yeah.
Well, the ones with the bolts in be more.
And that's brass, isn't it?
All
Or
solid brass
Solid brass.
with a Babbitt liner in it. So like I said, and they're numbered. Okay, this is number 2.
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
And so number 1, I have to go from this side to this side and taper it 7/1000ths.
Really?
You know, because I want to.
Oh, just for the fit?
Yeah, for the fit.
On one side? Yeah.
That way, even though it's going to be tapered, it'll have the same clearance all around the journal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd have it fit in the journal here, and you're going to have 7/1000 slop here. Well, if you're supposed to have 10/1000ths, that pushes you up to 17/1000 slop on this end.
All right.
So I figure I'll just machine the taper to it and fit it. I'm going to fit it probably tighter than the 10/1000ths because it's not going to ever do any work.
Yeah.
You know, it's just going to.
Oh, it won't overheat and bind, and yeah.
So I'm going to probably.
Won't be under a load or anything.
So I'm going to set it a little closer. What else we got here? Injection pump that broke. When I pulled it apart, this is the main part of the injection pump. This is when it goes around and hits those little wheels. There's a roller in here. And they had 2 pins in here. These little pins. And then there's little threaded plugs that screwed in here to hold them in place. And I couldn't figure out what them pins are for. When I put this all together, a feeler gauge would go between them without touching it. You know, like a 1000 feeler gauge that doesn't touch them. And so I went down and talked to Kim Baring, machine shop, Hillman here, and I said, I can make this part myself, but, you know, my stuff is antique machinery, and he's got all modern stuff. And I probably have to make about 2 or 3 of them, because I always mess up somewhere along the line, and, you know, get in a hurry. And I said, can you make me this part? Yeah, no problem. And I said, the only problem we got, I said, they don't have no money for this project. I said, give me your best rate, you know. And he said, I'll make it for nothing.
Nice.
And I said, that's a lot of machining there. And nah, don't worry about it. I said, well, pay no attention. It took me 2 weeks to put that system back together.
Oh, but
they had a part so long and had pieces all over the top of that tank there. And
now you get your head scratching.
Oh, jeepers. If it wasn't for that thing up there, I'd be hurting a little bit. And well, then I needed the part made for the air start mechanism. And well, one of these pieces here, when I took these apart, one of these was laying down in there inside the valve. I thought, well, where in the world did that come from? That's before I tore that part apart. And I said, well, that looks kind of important. And then when I tore that apart, I found it's on top of the rotor shaft. That's a big brass rotary valve up there, and this sits on top of a shaft. Then this part goes into the top housing, goes against it, and there's 2 Allen screws that adjust it, and it sets the preload, and this is the bearing that it rides on. So I could get that bearing, but it's 7/1000 thicker, so that throws me off. So I had to take machine 7/1000 off the bottom of the rotor to have my clearances come out. So I went down to Dave Jelka, Jr., and he made me these 2 parts. And them are hard. You can't touch them with a file or a hacksaw. The only thing you touch them with a grinder. And so I knew they had to be heat treated. And he said, well, Vidal's, when they send dies in and have them heat treated. All right, you done that. Well, then he called me and said, we got your parts made, but they lost them. So then he had to make them again. So the second time they paid more attention than they found them.
Okay.
And I guess you can change these coils as they burn out. You just pull the old one out and shove these back in the holes. Then you're supposed to take a little punch and just kind of punch it a little tiny bit.
So it stays in there? Yeah.
So it stays in there, and when it burns out, you pull it out and change it again. But I got to make new ones for it. Because these are, you know, you can't get these anymore.
No.
So I'm going to make new adapters. And I'm going to use like one of a 7.3 Power Stroke Ford, because they're nice long ones.
Mm-hmm.
Probably put something.
Just kind of adapt it more modern.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, because that's certainly old technology, that little coil down there, I'd imagine, eh?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
know how he did it. It must have been a rod or something running through that heated up and just, you know, sent that heat to the bottom end.
These are them right here. These set on top of the head.
Okay.
And the torch is on this side.
Okay.
And it blows across this pin, but it heats this area right here.
Oh, and that's what they would consider the glow plug.
Yeah, and then the injector kind of, when it fires on it, it just catches the end of it.
Okay.
And I couldn't figure out what that pin's there for.
That's just a guide, do you think, or?
No, it didn't make no sense. Then that piece I showed you sets down in this part right here. And the injector goes in here, and on the other side of that hole is where the glow plug went into.
Oh, kid.
Looks like you got a little work right on this one here.
Oh yeah, she's pretty. We're kind of not planning on using the torch.
Right.
But we're gonna. Floating here someplace.
Oh, that's a torch that's built right into it, kinda?
Yeah, it goes into. They got special brackets that kind of hold it and stuff. Then it kind of sets in here like this.
Okay.
And then on the other side, like this manifold here, this hooks on the other side of it. Oops, come on, out there.
Now that's like an intake manifold then, you're saying?
No, that's just for when the flame's going in here, it exhausts up this side, goes up these tubes, and they have a stack that goes out the roof. That way the exhaust kind of goes outside. The fumes don't stay in the
Oh,
cabinet.
as far as just firing it, kind of.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
All
that's
right,
kind of like
okay.
a chimney.
Like an exhaust, basically exhaust for the...
Chimney for the. So you got to crank that. I got one that I haven't got the cover on yet. And what it does, oops, there's a glass housing that goes over top of this.
Okay.
Well, you can adjust these here for each one, and you got to count so many drops a minute when the engine's running. Like this one might be 10 a minute, this one might be 15.
Depending where it's going.
And yeah, depending where it's going. And then
That's a lot of calibration.
and I got to recalibrate them too, because I've already changed them, taking it apart. This is what it looks like inside.
That's pumping all the oil as you crank it.
Yep, there's that cranker. Yeah, see, there she comes out already. But they had a lot of water in it, so I had to wait till it thawed out to get the ice out of it. But they're like a double pump. She pumps off the bottom, pumps up one line here, and as it pumps up, you can see count the drops in here.
Drops going down.
Then that line goes to another pump, comes out here, so this is pressure fed. So there's actually two pumps in there. One pumps it up to here, then the other one pumps it to the bearings.
That's the air compressor for the engine.
Yep, and then it's got the line here, it runs through the tank. And then if you don't want it, you kick this lever down here and that just shuts off the intake valve. Then the air just blows back and forth through the hole here. But when you want it to pump, you just kick it back on. Then the two oilers bowl up here, and like this bank oils so many main bearings, and oils one oil line on the cylinder, and one on the other side oils the other oil line on the cylinder.
You can see the whole array of them going down and separating.
Yep. And then these are the blow-off lines, so that any accumulate in the crankcase, it kind of blows off. I think these lines here were hooked to this little thing here. So when it's running, they had petcocks on here. You could open them up and blow them off, shut them off.
Yeah.
But I see they just changed them, the lines hanging out there. And these here, these are air valves. These suck air in when the piston goes up. The air pulls in around there. And when she comes down,
It shuts off.
it just shuts the air off. And there's two of them on either side. It just shoves the air up into the head. And the manifold's water cooled, and they had a domestic heating coil in there for hot water on the boat.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
I took it out. It was all rotten.
No, you don't need it for demo.
Yeah.
Coffee or something.
I just figured it was going to be a headache, so I took it out of there.
They did that a lot of that to keep warm because they're pulling those nets in,
Right, yeah.
and their hands are freezing from the cold water out there, and then they put their hands up.
Really?
Huh. So that'd be like for starboard start, whatever you call it. This would be neutral, and this would be for running the other way,
Huh.
for starting it, on the air starter.
Okay.
But I guess if you're tricky enough, and I read on it in the book, you can either write down, because see, a lot of them didn't have a transmission on it. It was just drive right to the prop.
Okay.
Well, you idle down, and you count the RPMs. You know she's probably only going to make one more, and then she's going to quit. Well, then you take this lever here. Nope, this lever, and you reverse it real quick. And then when she comes up, the way she's running to the right,
She'll go the other way?
she'll fire,
Out the
and
way.
then she'll run the other way, without stopping it.